How you eye?
Oh, it's cool.
Damn! Well, around here, between Normandy and Weston, we call this here.
And would you want to come back and Smokey?
Personally, I probably won't, because I never want to shortchange my audience and things, because it was just a small movie. We filmed it in 20 days, and I didn't get, about 10,000.
In 1995, a small film shot in a rushed 20 days with a budget under $3 million suddenly became a cultural monument for Black America. Friday. You remember it, right? A comedy, but carrying the weight of a community that Hollywood kept forcing into violence and tragedy. And in the middle of that flame, one character rose into legend: Smokey, Chris Tucker. Hollywood believed Friday was the biggest blessing of his life, that Tucker was born to be Smokey. But nearly 30 years later, Chris Tucker dropped a confession that shattered everything. Friday was one of the worst experiences of my life. Why would a role worshipped as iconic around the world become the scar Chris Tucker wants to erase the most conflict with his faith? The trauma of having to inhale real weed smoke every day, turning down. Next Friday, even when the studio offered him $12 million, all the truths hidden for 30 years are about to be exposed. Let's begin. Hollywood, early 1990s. The screen was filled with black actors, but all of them were trapped inside the same formula gun's blood gang's death and despair. It was the era of Boys in the Hood Menace 2 society. Colors films praised as authentic, but in reality only showing half of life in South Central. They turned an entire community into a symbol of violence, gloom, and severity. But for people who actually grew up there, like Ice Cube and DJ Pooh, South Central wasn't only gunshots. It was nosy neighbors, friends roasting each other all day, goofy little hood antics, and laughter rising from poverty. Hollywood didn't show that. They only showed the darkness and forgot the light, the real everyday humanity of Black Americans. Ice Cube and DJ Pooh wanted to fix that. They wanted a movie not about death, but about life. That's why Friday was born. After Ice Cube and DJ Pooh finished the script, the film was officially greenlit, but under harsh conditions, it had to be shot fast, tight, and cheap. Friday was given only $2.3 million, extremely low for a Hollywood film in the 90s. The entire shoot lasted just 20 days. The filming location, not a soundstage, not a $100,000 set. Everything happened on a real street in South Central Los Angeles. What you see in the film, Craig's lawn, the fence, the living room, the alley, they were real homes. The production had to pay for every square foot. Real setting, real people, real atmosphere. That's why Friday had a raw, lived-in feel no Hollywood film had at the time. What scene do you remember most from Friday? Even with such a small budget, Friday still brought together a cast that would later become legendary. Ice Cube played Craig Jones, an unemployed guy who was somehow the most level-headed person in the neighborhood. Cube wrote the character based on his own younger self. Chris Tucker played Smokey, the soul of the movie, a loud-mouthed, trouble-loving friend who always found a way to start something. Nia Long played Debbie, the beautiful, smart next-door girl who became the national crush of the 90s. Tiny Lister Jr., DeBow, the giant neighborhood bully, became the blueprint for the scary dude down the block in American pop culture. And John Witherspoon, Mr. Jones, the talkative, sharp-tongued, but incredibly lovable father. At that time, Witherspoon was already a legend in the comedy world. This combination made the movie feel like an ordinary day, but each character had such a strong personality that you could never mistake one for another. When Friday hit theaters on April 26, 1995, no one, not even Ice Cube, imagined it would achieve something blockbuster films. Couldn't it become the cultural heartbeat of a generation? Friday didn't look like anything else from that era. No gangsters, no shootouts, no killings. With a $2 million budget, Friday made nearly $30 million at the box office, then became a monster in the VHS DVD market, selling out for years. In South Central and across America, Friday was rewatched endlessly. Smokey's lines became slang. His expressions became real-life memes. People said, "Bye Felicia," long before the meme ever existed. Every black neighborhood had a Mr. Jones, a Debo, a Smokey. This was a black film made for black people, the truest, realist version of everyday life. Nearly 3 decades later, Friday remains one of the most quoted black films in history. It launched the careers of Chris Tucker, Nia Long, Tiny Lister, John Witherspoon. The black community loves Friday because for 90 minutes, they saw themselves. But ironically, the light Ice Cube tried to create became the darkness that consumed Chris Tucker. He admitted Friday is the most haunting film of my life. Why? Everything started with an ultimatum. When New Line Cinema read the script for Friday, they instantly saw the potential. But the opportunity came with an ultimatum that changed the entire fate of the movie. DJ Pooh was not allowed to play Smokey. The studio wanted a recognizable face, someone already known in Hollywood. DJ Pooh, the very person who created Smokey, was removed from the heart of his own story. And that decision triggered a domino effect of problems. Pooh lost the role. Tucker got pulled into a character that was never meant for him. This wasn't just a casting decision. It was the first twist of fate pushing Chris Tucker onto a path filled with pressure conflict and emotional damage, something he wouldn't talk about for nearly 30 years. Friday was not written for Chris Tucker. Most people don't know that Smokey, the character who made the world laugh and turned Friday into a classic, was never written for Chris Tucker. Smokey was based entirely on DJ Pooh. His personality, his habits, his past of smoking weed, selling weed, and growing up in the streets. Smokey was DJ Pooh in real life, and Chris Tucker. He was a church kid, not a street guy. He didn't even curse outside of acting. What fans never knew was that Chris stepped into a role completely opposite of who he really was. Ice Cube and DJ Pooh created Friday to show the real neighborhood they grew up in. But Chris Tucker was dropped into someone else's reality, a world he didn't belong to, didn't feel comfortable with, and couldn't truly embrace. Chris Tucker survived those weed scenes in pure anxiety. To audiences, Smokey was the life of Friday, the funny, carefree stoner who made every scene pop. But behind that laughter, Chris Tucker was dealing with one of the most uncomfortable and conflicting experiences of his career. Chris didn't smoke weed in real life. He didn't like it. He didn't want to be around it. But Smokey was a character built entirely around weed. Nearly every Smokey scene involved smoking, getting high coughing, zoning out, running low on product. Every day on set, Chris had to perform those scenes over and over again. The crew, the extras, even locals who watched the filming were smoking real weed. Smoke filled the entire set. Chris, who wasn't used to it at all, was surrounded by that thick haze for hours. He started having headaches, dizziness, blurry vision, nausea, and a burning throat. Kevin Fraser once said, Chris had to keep stepping outside because the weed smoke was making him woozy, like he was actually high. But whenever the camera rolled, he had to act like this was Smokey's paradise. He had to laugh, move fast, talk fast, bring high energy, while his body was rejecting everything around him. Fans watched and said he acts like a real stoner. The crew thought it was hilarious, but only Chris knew that wasn't acting. That was him pushing through real discomfort. And then it got worse. People in real life actually believed he smoked. Kids, teens, and grown adults shouted "Smokey" at him on the street. They asked if he had weed. They laughed and said this guy is really a stoner. Smokey became a label he couldn't peel off. But even that wasn't the worst part. Friday hit Chris Tucker's faith and his conscience hard. What almost no one knows is that Chris Tucker's life revolves around his faith. He grew up in a strict Christian family, was active in church from childhood, and always tried to live right, clean, and not be a bad example. But Smokey was the exact opposite: constant weed smoking, non-stop cursing, lying, messing with gangs, living wild, careless, and irresponsible. He was afraid the role sent the wrong message, especially to kids watching the film. He once said clearly, "I didn't want to represent everybody smoking weed. That wasn't me." He didn't want to be a bad influence. He didn't want to promote weed culture. He didn't want his son someday watching Friday and thinking his father was actually a stoner. Smokey made the whole world laugh. But he made Chris Tucker feel like he was drifting farther from God and farther from the man he wanted to become. Friday distorted Chris Tucker's image. Hollywood started offering him only one type of role. Right after Friday blew up, Hollywood slapped a label on Chris that he couldn't peel off: the guy who plays addicts. Within just a few months, almost every script that showed up had the same template: a junkie, a stoner, a goofy burnout, or the loud, over-the-top high black guy used as comic relief. No one called him Chris. No one cared who he really was. They only saw Smokey, never the person behind the character. And this was what hurt Chris the most. Smokey accidentally locked him into one type of role, shrinking his entire career into a single box. Friday was a success, but to Hollywood that success translated into one thing. Chris Tucker was just the addict guy. Nothing more, nothing less. That was the deeper reason Friday became the most haunting experience of his life. A scar he avoided talking about for many years. The mental pressure, the conflict with his faith, the misunderstanding of his image. That was only half the pain. The other half came from something much more real, much more brutal money. Chris was paid only $10,000, and he felt exploited. Friday became a cultural phenomenon, pulling in nearly $30 million at the box office, and tens of millions more in VHS and DVD sales, making New Line Cinema a massive profit. Ice Cube leveled up. The whole cast was celebrated and became part of a new legend. And Chris Tucker, all he got was $10,000. Not because he acted poorly, not because the role was small, but because Friday was a low-budget film and Chris wasn't a star yet. But the pain wasn't in the number. The pain was in the fact that he became the soul of the movie, but was never treated like the soul of the movie. Chris never openly said he felt exploited, but in many interviews he repeated the same bitter phrases. They didn't pay me much. I didn't make any real money from Friday. Friday made him famous, but it also made him realize a painful truth. Smokey's laughter was worth millions at the box office, yet paid next to nothing to the man who created it. And that sense of unfairness, combined with his fear of being boxed in, became one of the major reasons he turned his back on Next Friday, the sequel. Why Chris turned down $2 million. For Next Friday, the truth is more complicated than fans ever imagined. In 2000, when New Line Cinema prepared to make Next Friday, they had one mission: bring Smokey back at any cost. Ice Cube even said publicly, "We were ready to pay Chris Tucker $10 to $12 million to do Next Friday. $12 million for a role that would take only a few filming days. An unbelievable amount for a 28-year-old comedian. But even more unbelievable was the fact that Chris Tucker said no. Why would a rising actor, not rich, yet not A-list, walk away from a life-changing amount of money? In his interview with All Urban Central, Chris said it plainly. One of the reasons I didn't do the second one is because of the weed. That movie became a phenomenon. And I said, I don't want everybody smoking weed. I don't want to represent that. This was the truth. No sugarcoating, no excuses. Smokey had become the spirit of Friday, but he had also become Chris's moral burden. $12 million couldn't buy back his peace. And the bigger reason Chris Tucker was on the edge of something much greater, cleaner, exactly the direction he wanted. When Ice Cube sent the offer for Next Friday, Chris Tucker was at a turning point in his career. Director Brett Ratner was fighting to cast him in Rush Hour. Detective Carter was the total opposite of Smokey no weed, no cursing. That was the image Chris wanted. And then everything happened. Rush Hour with a $3 million paycheck, Rush Hour 2 with $20 million, Rush Hour 3 with $25 million. Chris Tucker became the highest paid black actor in Hollywood, surpassing Eddie Murphy and Denzel Washington. And all of that happened because he turned down Smokey. One door closed, but a much better one opened. No one turns down $12 million easily, especially someone who grew up poor. But Chris Tucker understood something most actors never dare confront. Some amounts of money are too big, but still not worth losing yourself for. However, Chris Tucker didn't walk away from Friday only because of money, religion, or the weight of the Smokey character. His decision came from something far more painful. A wound that no one has dared to mention for almost 30 years. The hidden rift between Ice Cube and Chris Tucker. When Friday 1995 exploded into a cultural landmark, Hollywood and audiences assumed Ice Cube and Chris Tucker were the golden duo who redefined street comedy. But the truth behind the scenes was completely different. Actor Faizon Love Big Worm was the first to break the silence cube, and Tucker stopped talking after the first film. The crack started from things no one said out loud, but everyone felt. 90% of the iconic lines created by Chris Tucker. Here is a fact that shocked many fans. Most of the lines that turned Friday into a Black cultural Bible were not in Ice Cube's script. There was no Puff Puff, Give You Got Knocked the F Out, I'm Broke, or Smokey's signature wild expressions. All of them were improv created directly by Chris Tucker, and the audience loved Smokey more than Craig. Fans walked out of the theater not talking about Ice Cube. They only talked about Chris Tucker, even though no one admitted it. That created a disconnect between the two. One was the writer, one was the person the whole world remembered. Those two positions are very hard to coexist peacefully for long. The sarcastic line in the opening of Next Friday, the first public jab. Right at the beginning of Next Friday 2000, there is a line mocking people who try to take credit for writing the first movie. Friday fans immediately knew who that jab was aimed at. It was Tucker. Almost every viral line in the film came from him, yet he never received credit. And that jab in part 2 felt like a quiet declaration. Smokey is not something you created. He belongs to us. It was a deep cut to Chris Tucker's pride after 5 years of total silence, credit conflict, ego, creativity. Ice Cube was the father of the script. But when all the success leaned completely towards Smokey, turning Chris Tucker into the film's biggest star, it unintentionally created an imbalance. Cube felt overshadowed in his own creation. Tucker felt not properly acknowledged. Neither of them spoke. No arguments, no anger, just silence. A silence that was heavy, real, and painful. Friday was laughter for millions, but for Chris Tucker, that laughter came mixed with tears. The tension between Chris Tucker and Ice Cube eventually faded over time. What remained was nearly 20 years of quiet distance. But during that time, Friday faced another tragedy: the passing of the legends who created the soul of the film. The cast's tragedy: empty chairs that will never be filled again. If the Tucker-Cube conflict was only a scar to their pride, then these deaths were real knives cutting into every Friday fan's heart. John Witherspoon Pops, a warm heart that suddenly stopped 2019. He was the father millions wished they could hear complain every morning. A comedy legend, a symbol of warmth. But one night in late October 2019, he collapsed in his own home. A sudden heart attack. No goodbye, no warning. From that day on, Pop's chair in the Jones household has remained forever empty. Tiny Debo Lister Jr., a giant who fell in solitude 2020. Debo, the man who made the whole neighborhood scatter at the sound of his bike approaching. But in real life, Tiny Lister was gentle, polite, and loyal. In 2020, when COVID-19 swept across America, he began experiencing fever coughing and difficulty breathing. Friends said he kept trying to work until his body couldn't take it anymore. He was found unconscious in his apartment. Final conclusion: COVID-19 complications. Combined with chronic heart disease. A giant, gone in silence. Bernie Mac, a comedy flame extinguished too soon. 2008, Bernie Mac didn't need much screen time. With just one cameo in Friday, he turned Pastor Clever into a legend. But behind that spotlight was a silent battle. Bernie Mac suffered from sarcoidosis, an autoimmune disease that damaged his lungs and organs. In 2008, he was hospitalized with pneumonia. The disease flared violently. Lung failure, organ failure. And Bernie Mac passed away at age 50, right when his career was at its brightest. The brightest star faded the fastest. A.J. Johnson Ezel, a street fate. No one escapes. 2021. Ezel, the lovable scammer of Friday. The man who made audiences laugh just by running. But A.J. Johnson's life off-screen was filled with struggle. Years of alcoholism destroyed his body. In 2021, he was taken to the hospital in a coma. The coroner concluded multi-organ failure caused by chronic alcohol abuse. Ezel fell exactly the way Friday once portrayed the people living on the edge of society. But the souls that left us are not the only thing haunting Friday. Even when fans begged for a final chapter to honor them, the film was trapped for 20 years in a battle almost no one knew about. Friday was locked away for 20 years, a battle no one saw coming. After the people who built Friday passed away one by one, The fan community wanted a final movie more than ever, a farewell, a proper closure for a legend spanning nearly 3 decades. But there was a painful truth: Friday was not allowed to continue because of one invisible barrier: rights ownership. Warner Brothers held the key, and Friday was locked shut. After Friday After Next, 2002, Ice Cube wrote many different versions of the script for Part 4. But every time he submitted them to Warner Brothers, the answer was always no. Not suitable, not marketable, not prioritized for budget. An entire franchise tied to black culture, shoved into a drawer by a corporation. DJ Pooh said one brutally honest sentence: "The franchise is being held hostage," and Ice Cube ran out of patience. "They won't let me make the movie the fans deserve." For 2 decades, Ice Cube fought for the rights, submitted new scripts, negotiated again and again. Fans begged, actors begged, even Hollywood begged. But Friday was locked in a drawer for 20 years. The cast passed away one after another. Fans thought the series was dead. Until 2025, the thing no one hoped for anymore, finally happened. Last Friday, 2025, officially greenlit. In March-April 2025, Warner Brothers replaced its executive board. The new people understood black culture, more understood the weight of Friday, and decided to reopen the case. Ice Cube was invited back into the meeting room for the first time in nearly 20 years, without hearing the word no. On April 12, 2025, according to Movie Insider, the project entered pre-production hiring crew, approving the final script, scheduling filming. For the first time in 20 years, Friday was officially greenlit. The black community exploded. Hollywood was stunned. Social media went insane. But that wasn't the biggest shock. Is Chris Tucker coming back? Smokey is more than a character. Smokey is an icon, the heart of Friday. 1995, the reason a low-budget film turned into a cultural explosion. Smokey was light for the audience, but darkness for Chris Tucker himself. So now, with Last Friday greenlit, will he dare return to the darkness? He once escaped. Revolt confirmed. While Chris Tucker's return as Smokey is still uncertain, discussions with Ice Cube are reportedly ongoing. This is the first time in over 20 years Chris Tucker hasn't rejected the idea immediately. He is considering it. Negotiating. Mike Epps, one of the pillars of the series, stated, "We're hoping to have Chris Tucker back. A real internal campaign is happening." The truth is, there is no official confirmation yet, but every signal is glowing green. Smokey now stands before the chance to return one last time to close the chapter the world never forgot. If Friday was the role that launched Chris Tucker into the sky, then 20 years later, life brought him back down to earth slowly, quietly, painfully. So how is Chris Tucker in 2025? Is he rich? Is he happy? Does he still have the glow he once had? His net worth, from a $20 million per movie star to just $5 million. There was a period when Chris Tucker was the highest paid black actor in Hollywood. Rush Hour turned him into a legend with a $20 million paycheck for every sequel. But by 2025, his net worth has dropped to around $5 million, a number that shocked many fans. Why he struggled with years of tax debt. The IRS confirmed Chris Tucker owed up to $14 million. Hollywood fame couldn't hide those bills. And Chris began selling the assets he once cherished most. In 2007, Chris bought a lakeside mansion in Florida for about $6 million. But when the housing crash hit, the bank filed foreclosure. Documents showed he owed $4.4 million. The house had to be sold off at a devastating loss. A man who once stood at the top of the world, now fighting the IRS with a net worth reduced to about $5 million. Those financial blows taught him one thing: money can buy a house, but it can't buy peace. Today he lives simply, rarely appears in films, and no longer chases Hollywood paychecks. But the irony is, Chris isn't broke. He just no longer cares about chasing wealth. He once said plainly, "I'm not obsessed with money anymore. I want peace." His personal life, a man who chose peace over fame. People know Chris Tucker for his laughter, but his personal life is full of quiet, emotional chapters. Hollywood sees a $20 million star. The community sees the legendary Smokey. But in real life, Tucker is a man who loved, made mistakes, paid the price, and is trying to live true to his faith. At the height of his rising career in the mid-90s, Chris Tucker married Asia Pryor, She wasn't a celebrity, not a public figure. She was a casting director, someone behind the scenes, not under the spotlight. They married around 1997. A year later, their son Destin Christopher Tucker was born in 1998. That was when Chris became busy with rush hour fame, exploding money pouring in. But at the same time, their marriage fell into chaos-packed schedules, non-stop touring, filming, media pressure. In 2003, they divorced. No scandal, no drama, no accusations. A relationship ended with maturity and respect, but it left a deep mark on Tucker. If you ask Chris Tucker what matters most, the answer is his son, Destin. He once said, "Everything changed when my son was born." This is why he rejects negative or unhealthy roles. He worries Smokey would give his son the wrong idea about who his father is. He chooses a clean lifestyle, no alcohol, no drugs. Chris wants to be the kind of man his son can be proud of, not because of fame, but because of integrity. Chris Tucker is a devoted Christian. Not the Hollywood performative type, he is genuinely serious about his faith. He attends church, weekly donates to many religious organizations, lives clean and disciplined, and avoids Hollywood party culture. This faith is the reason he walked away from Friday and refused next Friday. It's also why he often goes against Hollywood, where money and fame usually outweigh values. After the divorce, Tucker dated India Arie and Vanessa Mendoza, but none of the relationships led to marriage. Today, Tucker hasn't remarried, doesn't flaunt girlfriends, and stays out of tabloids. He lives quietly, prioritizing family over romance. His legacy, what Chris Tucker wants fans to understand. Chris Tucker never hated Friday. He never dismissed its cultural impact. To him, Friday is culture history, a timeless landmark. But behind the laughter Smokey brought to millions lies a truth Tucker has carried for nearly 30 years like an invisible scar. Chris wants fans to understand Smokey is not him. Smokey made the world laugh, but made him lose himself. He once admitted in a rare, vulnerable moment, "Friday helped make me famous, but it hurt me more than anyone knows." That is the real legacy. A character who became a cultural icon, but also left a deep psychological scar on the man who created him. And now, with Last Friday officially greenlit, with the possibility of Smokey returning after more than 20 years, the biggest question isn't will Chris Tucker come back? The real question is, if Smokey returns, is Chris truly ready to face the version of himself that once hurt him? Do you think Smokey should return in Last Friday? Do you think Chris Tucker was right to walk away from Part 2? Do you understand more about the pain behind his laughter? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the deepest, realest, and most shocking stories about the legends. There are countless Hollywood secrets you've never heard, and I'm here to reveal them all. See you in the next video.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.